was looking at, what kind of person do I want to be? So I fell into the hedge fund world, but what kind of investor do I want to be? Seeing the impact of us actually investing and supporting those local communities was actually really cool. So I was like, okay, is there a way to marry up, yes, finance and, what we enjoy doing and, hitting our bonuses, but then also can we combine it whereby we actually do good?
Today we have a great guest for you, Shamik Parekh from Octopus Ventures. He's got an interesting journey, having been born in South Africa, then growing up in the UK, initially going into commodities trading, doing a master's, starting a company there, and after starting that company and it dissolving, then going into the venture space and looking at how to invest and how to open up investment opportunities for people from diverse backgrounds. His focus in health tech at the moment. So if you're looking to either get into venture or looking to raise money in the future, this will be a great episode for you to learn more about what he does and how it could potentially help you. So Shamik, we've just heard about where you got to today, but what were you like as a kid? Did you believe one day you have these big dreams and be able to make an impact like you have? Or were you much higher than that?
I think as a kid, I was quite shy. I was loud and quite so in the class, I think I get a lot of energy from people. So in the classroom setting, I think my reports every year was Shamik distracts the class too much, or Shamik talks too much. But I think it just depends on, I guess, the environment that I was in. I think more often than not, it was very much a question of, I think I'd naturally revert to a shy side as opposed to anything else. But I think growing up, I think we had a very tight-knit family growing up in South Africa. So it was quite nice to have cousins around me, my uncles and my aunts, my mum and dad, obviously, and my grandparents. So I think that family unity just made you more confident to want to take risks or just do stuff that you wanted to do. So I think initially I was quite shy growing up and then just kind of came out of it, but had no idea what I wanted to do when I was growing up. So yeah, quite glad I fell into this.
As you grew in your confidence, what did you then hope to be? What were you looking at as in terms of careers at that point when you were in your late teenage years?
Yeah, so I think I was one of those students where I wanted to do nothing and just play games all day, or do everything and try take over the world. So it's very pulled between these two things, and I think my parents were very much a big influence in my life, and so are my cousins growing up. So seeing them do well in their careers and seeing them do well in their studies just kind of motivated me more to be better. So I think I had no idea what I wanted to do. I ended up going into the commodities world because I think that my dad was in that, and I was like, okay, cool, this seems fun. And then after a point in time, whilst I was working, I guess was looking at what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of so I fell into the hedge fund world, but what kind of investor do I want to be?
What caused that inflection point of thinking about it from that angle rather than just how do I make the most money?
Yeah, so I think when you are in a position to make a company money, it's always a good feeling to be okay, cool, this year I hit my bonus target, or this year I've done this and this year I've done that. But I think after a while it just becomes numbers on a page, and again, not in a cocky way, but it's what does it actually mean? And I think we were at that point supporting and investing in artisanal mining operations in Papua New Guinea, Bolivia, and random and weird and wonderful places around the world. And I think seeing the impact of us actually investing and supporting those local communities was actually really cool. So I was like, okay, is there a way to marry up, yes, finance and what we enjoy doing and hitting our bonuses and bonus targets, but then also can we combine it whereby we actually do good for a bigger community? So I think that was a natural inflection point to be is this what I want to do, and really what can I do from this position of sitting in a Mayfair office or sitting in a London office. So I think that was also a deciding factor. I think there were a couple of stories from my commodity trading days, and all of those amalgamated into wanting to leave and join the world of venture.
So you've obviously been in London for a while now as well, right? So you said you're born in South Africa.
Yep.
What caused that? What made you move to London as opposed to working in the commodities industry or the finance industry in South Africa?
So I think my parents, so I am third generation South African, and so my parents, so my dad, my granddad all grew up and lived through like apartheid in South Africa. And I think it was my granddad's dream for all of his grandchildren to one, study in the UK and have a better life, because I think that's all they'd known, which was apartheid and that split across Southern Africa. So I think that was the first push. And then the second push, I think at the time growing up, South Africa was post-apartheid was relatively safe, but you could see in certain areas it was becoming less safe. So I think the family just took the decision of like, okay, why don't we all just go out and emigrate to the UK. So I think we landed over here in 2003, 2004. And yeah, did most of my schooling here as well. So it was quite nice. I've totally lost my accent. So I think that was the main determining factor. And then I think, again, just naturally going through school, going through sixth form and university over here, you build your friendship circle here, you build your community around here. So it's just like easier to stay, I guess, as opposed to moving back.
So working in the finance industry, right? There's many, many people who work in the finance industry, but a lot fewer of them go into venture and down that path. How did you make that transition? Because it's not an easy one for many people. They might decide, okay, I want to go into venture, but deciding to do that and actually being able to do it is two different things. How did you make that initial transition?
Yeah, so I think, again, I went to university, worked for 3 years in the hedge fund world, or 3.5 years in the hedge fund world, and then went to do my master's at Exeter. And I wasn't really exposed to, I guess I come from like a very entrepreneurial family anyway, but the whole side of venture was quite new to me anyway, and to most of my family as well. So we knew of it, but I don't think anybody was in it. And I guess this is one of the benefits of coming from like a big family, which is, you can afford to take some risk, or even if you do want to take a risk, somebody will be there to like support you and you'll have a backer, which is a nice feeling to have. So I think that was a huge motivator for me to take risk. So I think it was in my year, so during my year at Exeter, I started up like a Fintech business, and we received like first round funding. And that was like the first taste of like my own personal entrepreneurial story. Tell
us more about that, right? Because you've skipped over that a little bit. You started a fintech business. Not everybody does that, and you raised funding for it.
Yeah.
What happened there? What was the idea? How did you come up with it?
Yeah, so I think it was a social enterprise program that Exeter University was running. So interestingly, Exeter suffers from one of the highest homelessness issues across the country. So myself and I think it was 4 other people thought about, how do we address this problem? So we created a chatbot. So this is back in 2017, 2018, where we created like an automated chatbot, which essentially would provide a user to engage and to better understand their finances. So I think the interesting fact and what spurred us to do this was, I think it was like 40% or 50% of the population in Exeter are one paycheck away from defaulting on their mortgage. And when you hear that, it's like, okay, surely there's something we can do. So we created links between financial ombudsman.
It's a hard word, don't worry.
It's a hard word. I still can't get it right. So financial ombudsman, the local council, banks, so local banks, and mortgage providers and real estate agents. And what we tried to do is to say, okay, is there a way where we can, start to decode who are the most at risk of defaulting? And then, bring in a financial ombudsman to provide like free services and free advice on how to restructure their debt and credit. And the chatbot would essentially be that, that friendly, person over the end of the phone to be like, hey, like, don't worry about this. Like, we got you. And this is the support that you have access to. Because I think a big thing is, education as well, or access to it. And I think this is where, it's really exciting to be part of, I guess, the venture space, because whilst I invest in Healthtech, I see everything from Fintech, EdTech to health. So it's quite nice to see that push upstream. But I think that initial business received first round funding. And I think just because of, university and I guess exams, I think inevitably I went to uni to do a master's. And I don't think my parents would have been too happy if I came back and be like, hey, I dropped out, set up a business. So I came back to my exams and put the business on the side. And I think it just out of that fizzled through. So we returned the shareholders' money and gave it all back. But I think it was just that time commitment piece, which we just couldn't give.
You made that startup then, which you then fizzled out. What was your next step after the master's? Where did you go to afterwards?
Yeah, so I was quite lucky at Exeter, and I think most universities offer this now, which is a career mentoring program. And this is where former alumni from the university, still stay in touch with their school and their college, and it's a question of the university providing access to their students to say, okay, these are the people that have graduated like 10, 20 years ago, and this is what they're doing now. So it gives you somebody that you can relate to because they went to your uni. So I had a mentor who was at a private equity fund, and he showed me the ropes of, and I guess he introduced me to the world of like European and UK private equity. And with that mentor, discussed everything from venture capital to private equity and what it is that I wanted to do. And I think private equity is great, but you lose some of that human touch. I think early stage venture is quite interesting and very exciting because you get to sit with the founder face to face and go and talk through their challenges and work out broader strategy, but then also get ingrained into the nitty gritty detail if you wanted to. So I was oohing and ahhing as to what I wanted to go into, and ended up applying to a number of reaching out cold to a number of VC funds out in California.
Why California if you were in London?
Yeah, so I think it was one coming back from, I guess, the family support and the family support structure of just taking risk. I think I'd worked quite hard for 3.5 years, and I was like, okay, I've got somewhat of a foundation. So let me see what I can do with it. And it was very much a question of, I think VC in America is incredible, but then VC in like the West Coast is, I guess, where it all started from, right? So it was like, if there was a world where I could get exposure to that, I would 100% take it. So I applied through just reaching out cold to a number of VC funds. And I think, again, like having a warm network helps, or a network helps for warm introductions. But yeah, long story short, I ended up going to California as soon as I graduated to join a fund called Parekh Ventures. So it was a small, 6-man team. Run by Indians actually. So it was really cool to see how they've taken their journey from working in a big corporate, running their VC fund from within the corporate, and then spinning it out into their own. So that was also like a huge motivator to be like, okay, cool, this is the kind of people I want to work with and for.
So you mentioned there about how you didn't really know anything about the venture space until your mentor was able to help you out there. But what was it like actually working in venture capital? Because obviously some people listening won't really know what venture capital is, right? So the idea is that you've got investors who then put money into stages across early stage up all the way up to late stages as well. But you were focused mainly on early stage.
Yes.
For most of your career, right?
Yep.
And there's people who have ideas but don't have the money to actually make them happen. Then investors can come in, take some equity. If you might like Dragon's Den, that's an easy way to describe it. Not quite the reality, but that kind of idea, right?
Yep.
What was the reality like when you got into venture capital? Was it what you hoped it would be? Was there any differences between your expectations?
Yeah, I think it's quite funny. So whenever I talk about venture capital to people who don't know what it is, I use Dragon's Den as an example, or like Shark Tank. And I'm like, hey, this is what we do, but on a slightly different scale. But I think that is also a slight misconception, because I think what everybody sees is somebody walking into a room and there's like money on the table and the dragons are like, hey, we'll invest. But I think, when you actually go into a VC fund for the first time, one, I wore all my hedge fund suits and I took it to California because I was expecting a finance job. I got there and everybody's in shorts and I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I think the bigger expectation was, it's a lot more collegiate and friendly compared to, investment banking and the hedge fund world. But also I think people, there's a lot of like process, which I guess not many people see. And especially the founders, like I think there's the expectation of going there with a brilliant idea and just receiving money. But I think there's this whole idea of, running through due diligence as from an investor perspective, also raising the fund from like the VC fund's perspective as well. And then ensuring that, whatever you invest in, you support. And I think all of that kind of flies or tends to fly under the radar. I think now a lot of VCs are making noise around how they are active on the board and take like a very, I guess, a helpful position in the business. I guess actually most of the time it's a question of the founders doing really the hard work and we're just there to like lift them up if they need any help or like broader support and guidance. But ultimately, like we're there to support them and help them when they need to. but it's really their story, and we're just a small part of it.
What type of founders were you focused on at that fund in California?
Yeah, so we were an early stage VC fund as well, so seed to Series A. But we invested. I say we. I'm still not with the fund, but I'm very very loyal. But no, so the fund was investing in early stage entrepreneurs across cybersecurity, AI, machine learning, and healthcare.
Before it was cool.
Before it was cool, exactly. And they were doing healthcare before it was cool. So they invested in, I think they led the seed round for a business called Biome, which is doing exceptionally well right now. And they've done a number of like cybersecurity deals from Israel, because I think Israel's got a very unique structure to early stage businesses. But that was their core focus. And I think their claim to fame was they had John Cushman and Vincente Fox on the board, which is quite cool. So during their annual GP LP meeting, I was in the same room as them, and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, it was quite surreal to be part of that. But I think having exposure to, understanding VC as a concept, so doing everything from, the analysis to market research to due diligence and, calling other people or calling references, and just really understanding the end-to-end process of not only an investment, but then also, I guess, fundraising for a fund as well was really eye-opening.
So obviously you stayed there for a while, but then you've gone on to work for other VC funds, and there's a bit in between as well, right? Which you created your own fund. Yeah.
So I think it was more of so I came back. So Trump was like, Shamik, go back. So I ended up coming back to London, and was in the process of looking for a job. And I think there was a LinkedIn post where they were looking to hire somebody in the team, and I was one of the first hires for this fund. So this is a brand new fund being set up from scratch, and it was very much focused on seed to Series A pan-European health tech, pre-COVID as well. So like it was health tech before it was cool as well. And these guys had the vision of creating and setting up a fund. And what we used to do is, whilst we were like raising for the fund, we would still obviously speak to founders. We'd try to build a brand. And more often than not, because the two partners and the two guys that created it, they, came from a healthcare background. So one of them was a GP, a doctor, and the other was a consultant. And I think they were providing a lot of value add to founders from day one without even investing in them. And I think that made the conversation around, hey, like, we're raising a fund, we don't have money right now, but when we do, because we're very like optimistic, but when we do, why don't you take our money instead of any others? And what we used to do is like support them as, whether it was a question around hiring or whether it was a question around, okay, this is your go-to market, whatever it was, we were like, okay, we'd be on hand and we'd almost be like a second team member. So that's the way we thought we'd differentiate ourselves. And we did that for, I think it was 18 months of like, one, doing the fundraising and trying to, speak to LPs, so limited partners who invest into other VC funds, and then two, speaking to founders as well and trying to find this perfect balance of, okay, how do we provide all the support that we want to, but not set false expectations that, we're going to be investing from day one, because we didn't have the capital. We didn't raise our first close at that point. So I think that was going on. And I think just to put money on the table, or food on the table, it was not Dragon's Den style, food on the table. It was very much a question of, okay, what can we do outside of that? So one of my colleagues, he went to go run Google Health, and the other partner and myself, we set up a Healthtech accelerator. So it was the perfect storm of, one, COVID coming into play, two, technology really picking up, and then three, doctors needing to adopt technology really quickly. So it was like the perfect storm of us, getting into this accelerator program. And whilst we did that, we scaled technologies from like electronic health records all the way through to like digital therapeutics during COVID. And that was like an eye-opening experience for me, because I didn't come from a healthcare background. But I think having been part of health tech investment in California, that was really the catalyst to make me stay within the space. Because again, it married up, finance, and it married up, I guess, impact. So I think healthcare is like naturally impactful, but it's also, how do we ensure that we invest in businesses that can have the biggest effect? So that's what we're doing, and we scaled a number of businesses across the NHS and the UK, and that was a really, really enjoyable experience, but a lot of long hours, especially over COVID. But it's good fun.
So one of the interesting things you mentioned there is, you mentioned GP, right? Because one of the confusing things is once you get into the venture space is that GP also means general partner for a venture fund. But for most people, mean general practitioner for healthcare. So there's sometimes these confusing different acronyms that are used, and it's good that you defined it there as well, because people do get mixed up. But looking at that experience there, so some people might be considering whether or not to go for an accelerator or not. And what was your experience in terms of how that was what were you able to do for those companies to really actually accelerate their journey and make them go further? And if, say, somebody's listening right now that's considering, they've just started a company, they're thinking about going onto accelerator, would you recommend they generally do that as a way to get themselves off the ground?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think a lot of the times, when you look at what stage you're at and what the accelerator program is providing. So we were when we were setting it up, we were very focused on supporting businesses that had already existed for a short while, who already got a strong tech stack, but just needed a way to break into the NHS or break into the public healthcare systems. And that was what one of my colleagues' specialisms was, how do we ensure technology works within healthcare systems? So I think it's very much a question of, one, understanding what your needs are as a founder, and then two, matching it to what the accelerator can provide. I think there's a lot of accelerator programs out there which just say, hey, we'll do everything for you. And then they tend to not do much because you're so pulled apart and you're so finely spread. Whereas I think if you find a targeted accelerator that says, okay, we will work with you on branding, or we'll work with you on marketing and sales, those are probably going to be the ones that are going to help you the most. And I think it's a question of, finding out, stepping back and finding out what you want as a founder. So if it's a question of, do you want to just help people, or do you want to scale and become $1 billion business? And those two are very, very interesting and different questions, because you can naturally have a lot of impact, but you may not be, right for a VC backing or an accelerator program. But it's a question of, how do you balance what you want and what you can get from them?
Obviously, in the end, you were able to invest through that company, and then you work at Octopus Ventures. But there's a story in the middle there, which is quite rare and has not really been told very much. Can you go into that a bit more detail?
Yeah, so I guess what had happened was, as we were creating this fund, so the fund was called TenX Health, and we were in the middle of fundraising, and I think we came to the idea of, how do we get this off the ground? So we were very close to raising what is called a first close in a fund, and that is where you can start officially deploying and investing capital, but it's not the final size of the fund. So we were nearing first close, and there was two options on the table. One, being backed by a large family office, and two, working and combining with Octopus. So I think this is one where, at, I guess, management level, it was a very interesting discussion to have, because whilst I wasn't privy to all of it, it was very much a question of, okay, what does it mean if we go down this route, or what does it mean if we go down that route? And I think inevitably what we found was, because we are very much pan-European focused, it was, can we join Octopus and bolster their European reach? So I think it was a great question of, what can we do from just a pure money perspective, or what can we do with a pure branding, money and talent perspective as well. So I think that made the conversation slightly easier as well. And we ended up joining forces with Octopus. So Octopus ended up acquiring the fund, and the three of us ended up at Octopus. So that was where, we were able to then focus on, or continue fundraising for that, and to, really have the backing of a well-known brand behind us. So I think all of that kind of helped structure what we wanted to do. Because I think, from a fund perspective, yes, money is great, and you want to raise as much as you can, and you want to close the fund as quickly as possible. But I think there's also, when you step back, there's a bigger strategic question of, okay, what resources do you have internally? How can you manage that? How can you work with what you don't have and what you do have? And where can you fill the gaps appropriately? So I think, it was quite a nice marriage between very much UK focused VC fund at the time, to then a dedicated pan-European health tech fund. So that marriage between the two just further exploded Octopus's reach.
So obviously you took quite a big risk by joining TenX Health when you did, when there was no funding yet, there was only the partners there, and it takes a huge amount of risk, didn't even know if it's going to work out or not, right? And you said you had to create the accelerator to pay the bills in the meantime, put food on the table. Yeah. So then joining Octopus Ventures, you suddenly had a backing of a much larger organization. How did that change things for you in terms of what you've been able to now achieve at Octopus in terms of helping some of the companies which you'd hope to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one, the idea of being backed and having backing just provides that extra layer of comfort and security. I don't want to say comfort because there's a lot of stress behind it, but a lot of security, I'd say, at least. And I think having the ability to, one, invest and support businesses that you wanted to support, and two, watch them grow and develop, just allows you that as that perspective of being an investor to be like, okay, cool, this is what I'm here to do. And I think having not only Octopus as a brand behind us, but then two, having a broader team, which everybody at Octopus is incredibly switched on, incredibly helpful, and just a great team to be part of. Like, we fundamentally also work for, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors, but also we work for our founders as well. So I think being in a position where not only we can provide help and guidance, but also invest and watch them grow is great to be part of.
I know you're a champion of people from diverse backgrounds as well in terms of your investment, and looking at giving the opportunity and making sure you're finding the best opportunities available for the funds for investment, right? And you're looking beyond just, say, the usual characters. How have you been able to try to find those people and to encourage them to reach their dreams and build what they think they can make of the impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this comes back to the conversation we were having before, which is, education and starting from very much the top of the funnel, as we say in VC terms, which is, how do we ensure that people understand and know what VC is? But then two, also, how do you, because not every business requires VC backing, but it's a question of how do we level the playing field and ensure that people know what VC is. So I think, what I've tried to do is go to, non-Golden Triangle universities and speak to students there just to be like, okay, cool, this is what is open to you. I think, I was quite fortunate to be able to take risks growing up, but I think, a lot of people probably don't have that luxury as much. So I think it is one where, just at least highlighting what venture is, what it means, and just showing that, okay, if you do have a great idea and if you really are passionate about it and you think it can change the world, like, these are the options that are open to you. And I think we also have, I think we have an open website where you can, submit a type form and submit your pitch deck to any of the investors. But also what we try to do is go out to networking events and really just invite as many diverse, both, ethnically and female to male and other genders. But it's more a question of how do we ensure that we're being fair in reaching out and making that outreach more accessible to others.
That's obviously some of the conversations we've been having as well, where you were at our event on Tuesday.
Yep.
And hopefully met a bunch of diverse founders there. Mm-hmm. But looking at the time now, I think we're going to move on to quick fire questions.
Sure.
So the first one is, who are 3 British Asians that you'd love to spotlight that you think are doing incredible work?
So there's a founder called Ravi Solanki who has received, I guess, first round funding and is one of our portfolio companies as well. But he's out there creating a new testing and diagnostics for cancers. And I think this is one where I'm slightly biased because it is healthcare, but I think it's one where the vision and the drive that he has and his prior background, it's all perfectly wrapped up to essentially execute on this idea that he has. So that's one guy. I guess a colleague of mine, Yutish, he recently made partner at Octopus. And I think just his ability to move through the ranks and from his career perspective, become partner at a one of UK's and Europe's largest funds is just incredible. And I think last but not least, it is, and I guess the second or the last person, but last but not least is Rabina Singh from Octopus. I think what she's done is, set up a fund from scratch as well, but also really pushing the agenda around, equality, fairness for very early stage founders. So we tend to invest at seed Series A. Rabina is going much earlier on, which is, pre-seed and university spin-out. So I think all in all, we're seeing a huge rise in not only entrepreneurs, but also investors that, essentially look like us and have that same mentality of supporting, diverse founders. So it's a really exciting time to be part of this early stage ecosystem.
So let's say people listening right now want to reach out to you for help or guidance. What's the best place to reach out to you to, or follow you and learn more?
Yeah, so I'm easily accessible. So either on LinkedIn, where I guess everything's there. So my email address, my LinkedIn profile, etc. But also, yeah, just via email, to be honest. And if anybody has any questions or questions around how to scale a business, or if they just want to talk about venture in general, like, yeah, happy to have a conversation.
And on the other side, is there anything that maybe the audience could help you with? Is there anything that you're looking for that would help you in your journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you have a great idea, and if you want to test it out, because I appreciate, having these conversations or these calls with investors can be quite daunting sometimes it's a question of, how can I make that easier? So I think if anybody has an idea, especially within the health tech space, because that's where I feel I can be the most helpful, but especially in the health tech space, yeah, do feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to have a chat.
So thank you so much for coming on. Have you got any final words to the audience?
I guess it's, build up a trusted network, one where, they not only support you, but also test you. And two, once you have that network, really take that initial step and just go for it.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us. And we don't think you realise how important you are. Because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission. And you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.